Is Donald Trump a friend to the UK or a foe? What do you think? 0207 862 2222 is the number that you need. Trump has already hit countries around the world with punishing taxes. Now, today, on what he is dubbing America's Liberation Day, he will announce more. He hopes taxing goods from other nations will encourage US companies to produce their own. But let's have a listen to what Donald Trump has to say.
We're going to charge countries for doing business in our country and taking our jobs, taking our wealth, taking a lot of things that they've been taking over the years. They've taken so much out of our country, friend and foe, and frankly, friend has been oftentimes much worse than foe.
Well, the EU and Canada have hit back with retaliatory taxes, but yesterday the Prime Minister said we have to take a calm approach.
Nobody wants to see a trade war, but I have to act in the national interest, and that means that all options have to remain on the table. But I am talking to the sectors most impacted, and I think what they want most is a calm and collected response to this, not a knee-jerk response.
Christian, is the special relationship over? Is Trump an ally or a foe?
Well, I think in relative terms, we are still one of the friendliest countries with the United States, possibly above all others, maybe with the exception of Israel. It's clear Donald Trump still very much loves this country because of his ancestry, and he's still besotted by the royal family, and obviously will be having a state visit in the next year or so. Donald Trump is clearly a much more unreliable president than we've dealt with in recent years. But all American presidents have been so-called America first. I think Donald Trump is just more explicit about it. He makes some fair points, I think, on, for example, defence spending. I think he's right to call out Europe for having not pulled our weight over recent years. But then we're also in the advantage of actually negotiating a free trade deal with America that many other countries have not got the privilege of negotiating. Now, will it negate these tariffs that are economically bad? Maybe not, but we are in a privileged position with Donald Trump, and I think it's unwise to make enemies with him. OK, we should remember, though, he didn't give us that trade deal in his first term when the Conservatives were really pushing hard to get it. Paula, what do you think? Is he a friend or foe?
I think it's safe to say, particularly looking at his behaviour over the last 100 days or so, that he is a foe, and we need to wake up to that reality very fast. I think we are misleading ourselves if we pretend that there is such a thing as a special relationship that exists now. And we have seen how Donald Trump behaves in terms of business with neighbouring countries. We've seen how he behaves in terms of countries on that international world, and it is very poor. And we've also seen, quite frankly, the calamitous example of his negotiation skills with Putin over Ukraine and the very blatant mineral grab that we're seeing there. Trump isn't a man who is interested in making America great again. Trump is a man who is only interested in increasing his own personal wealth.
You think it's his personal wealth? OK, well, look, let's have a quick look at what the UK exports to the US. OK, so, look, in total, we send 60 billion worth of goods to the US. Now, this includes £23 million worth of tea bags, £75 million worth of cheese, £971 million worth of Scotch whisky. We've got, this is the really big one here, luxury cars, 7 billion. That's Jaguar Land Rover sold the most last year, 125,000 cars. 1 in 8 cars manufactured in the UK goes to the US. That's a big export. 12 billion pounds worth of luxury goods. For example, Kurt Geiger handbags worth about 250 million pounds goes to the US, and about 9 billion pounds of pharmaceuticals. That is a lot of stuff. Now, cars is one of his big bugbears. He thinks that trade, by the way, is just unfair. He's basically saying, you guys are not buying enough from us and we're buying too much from you. I mean, some people, particularly people like myself, who understand very little about economics, think, you know, how can it be so unfair that America still is the strongest economy in the world? So you have to ask yourself the question. But, Christian, the IPPR have estimated that if he goes ahead with a 25% tax on cars, 7 billion quid's worth, that could actually cost 25,000 jobs here in the UK. How can we call him an ally?
Well, look, as I say, I think he's temperamental and I think he's selfish. And I also think that he is completely economically illiterate when it comes to tariffs. Tariffs essentially act as a tax on residents in America, not on residents that the goods are coming from, although obviously it will have severe job implications. Look, the global economy is very uncertain, and I think our government has been wrong-footed by Donald Trump, especially Rachel Reeves. We saw last week a big argument about what is referred to as fiscal headroom, which is the gap between everything the government raises in tax and everything it spends. Now, the problem we've now got is that these tariffs are going to wipe out that headroom. So all the cuts, the £14 billion worth of cuts that Rachel Reeves announced last week, they're redundant now. We need to go back to square one, and once again she's going to have to go back to the drawing books, and that's a problem with our government. That's a failure to plan from our government, and that's
the thing
that's
is,
unforgivable.
I mean, you say that, and many people will be agreeing with you, but Paula, how can you make plans? I mean, the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, is saying, well, we didn't take into account the Trump tariffs because we don't know what they are yet. Well, we'll be finding out tonight at 9 p.m. It's estimated that we're going to hear from the president, because actually the whole world doesn't quite know what the tariffs are and who's going to have to pay them.
And that's exactly the point. And that's exactly the point, to be fair to Rachel Reeves, that the OBR made when they were doing their calculations. And it's this 10 billion kind of headroom that she gave herself, quite sensibly so, I think you'll accept, that she gave herself, that Donald Trump has now come along and said in one of his crazy toddler tantrum moods, oh, I'm just going to whack on this percentage that is going to essentially cost our country 25,000 jobs, let alone what it's going to do on the international stage. Because, of course, we know what tariffs do in terms of the global market. They strangle the entire market. They impact on the supply chain. And we know what happens when there's an impact on the supply chain, because we saw it when we came out of COVID. Yeah. That's going to be that increase in prices.
So the idea might be, even if we get off with slightly fewer tariffs, we might suffer the knock-on effect, because if big countries like China, big economies, I should say, and the EU suffer from tariffs, that's going to have a knock-on effect to us. Let's also look, because what's interesting, because this is all about Donald Trump being a friend or foe to the UK. Paula, we're also hearing reports that the Trump administration's very interested in the state of freedom of speech here in the UK. I'm talking about the case of Livia Tasiki-Bolt. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She was protesting outside an abortion clinic in those areas where British law says no one's allowed to protest or hold signs, whether you're pro or against abortions. Now, we are being told that the Trump administration are very keen to find out what happens tomorrow in this judicial case. Does that worry you? The fact that all of a sudden the Trump administration is saying, we don't think you're treating freedom of speech correctly in the UK, and we're going to keep an eye on that.
I mean, I'm so glad that you brought this up, Alexis. I'm totally baffled and silently outraged at what Trump and the Trump administration are doing in relation to trampling all over our justice system, essentially. And this is a justice system, remember, that ordered Trump and the administrators not to deport however many Venezuelans it was back to Venezuela. The judge made an order in America, and Trump said, ignore the judge, and his minister said, ignore the judge, we'll do what we want. So there we have an example of how the Trump administration trample all over the rule of law and yet think it's appropriate to kind of lean over the fence and say, well, what are you doing in terms of your freedom of speech? And let's be clear, freedom of speech is not the right to say anything you want or the right to do anything you want.
Christian, are you concerned, not just in the report that the Trump administration is closely monitoring what happens here? I mean, this is British law passed in Parliament. This isn't just a fad that we decide to clamp down on freedom of speech or not. This is UK law passed in Parliament. also we're hearing that Keir Starmer is considering, for example, the digital services tax. Big tech companies, Google, Meta, X, owned by Elon Musk, all those people you saw at the Trump inauguration standing behind him, to actually reduce the amount of taxes that they pay. Do you worry that the UK is actually now kowtowing to someone like Trump?
Well, to be honest, we always have. We're not the great world power that we were 100 years ago. And whilst we are so economically dependent on America, and we're dependent so much on our security at home and abroad, we do have to, in a sense, listen to what they're saying. And on the freedom of speech point, I actually think it may have been passed by MPs. I think the particular law they're referring to is a very, very bad law that sets very worrying precedents. There are other issues to do with freedom of speech in the UK. And given that our opposition parties in Parliament were so decimated by the last general election and Labour's majority is so large, I actually find it reassuring that there's a powerful voice standing up for free speech. It happens to be coming from America. And in that sense, from my perspective, I think that's another tick in the box of friend rather than foe.
All right, let me pause you there. Let's hear what people are saying at home. Grace is in London. Grace, welcome to the show. Do you consider Trump a friend or a foe?
A foe in so many ways, to us and to humanity. When he first came on the political scene almost a decade ago, I was rather interested because I actually slightly concur with the view, for instance, that it's not wrong for people to stand outside abortion clinics offering help, so long as it's done in a respectful way. But I rapidly observed that he is utterly antithetical to all the values that I believe we should have. I mean, he tries to keep on the side of some Christians, but he's so opposed to how God taught us to be, his arrogance and his selfishness. The way he talked recently about how tariff is the most beautiful word, better than love, because it could make this country rich. I mean, he's selfish, and we've had this kind of semblance of civility in the Western world, whereby a lot of politicians will pretend at least that they care about others, but he's just completely defensive with that, and it filters down into our culture. It filters down, and there are more and more people thinking that being outright selfish and unpleasant to others is completely fine, whereas previously we kind of had this, Judeo-Christian idea that you should treat other people with respect because they're human beings made by God, but Trump is overthrowing that completely, and him cutting the overseas aid budget, as much as he's lied about what it was being spent on, will lead to millions of human beings dying. So I'm really angry with him in so many ways. OK,
Grace, you've made your feelings very clear. Thank you for kicking us off. Let's speak to Tony, who's in Essex. Tony, do you think he's a friend or foe?
Well, I think he's a foe, but I have my reasons for that. And also, I think that the reason why I say that is because, one, he's only doing it for himself. He's trying to build a picture of him being the world's greatest leader, and in doing so, he seems to have a different view about how he's going to do things with the rest of the world, or with the rest of the political world. Now, I've been following Trump since his inauguration, right from the beginning, and I've been following him since 2016, and there are certain things that I can say, he's got some good points there. Yeah. But there's a lot of things that I think that he does it just on a whim or trying to get people's reaction. Now, he's a demagogue. We all know that. And the fact that he is a demagogue, he says things to get people's reactions. Now, because he does that, he's trying to make a point. And the point is that he wants to be the best president in the world. Yeah. Now, by doing the tariff system, he's following other presidents prior to that. At the beginning, I think there was a president in the United States that believed in tariff system. This is during the Civil War, and he seems to think that he worked then, so he's going to be working now.
Tony, just a quick question before we move on. Do you think that special relationship that we keep talking about here in the UK, let's not forget the French also think they have a special relationship with the US. They talk about it in different ways. But do you think that Donald Trump is going to show the UK special treatment?
No, of course not. If he does, it's only just to show that he's I'm going to give a little bit to the UK. I'm going to give a little bit to the European Union, Paris, and so forth, so that they look good. So I look good on the world market.
All right, Tony, thank you. Okay, good. I mean, he hates the EU, Donald Trump. I think he's described it as a system put together deliberately to go after the US.
Yes.
I mean, it's a bit of an irony.
It was.
United.
It was.
Forgetting the Second World War and all that arose from that.
Economically, the arguments behind the European Union was to create a single bloc economy that could compete with America and with China.
To compete with another bloc economy of United States.
Exactly,
right.
Yes. But I'd also just make the point that actually America has often been a very unreliable ally throughout history, way before Trump. You think about the fact they were late to the First and the Second World War. You think about the money they lent us after the Second World War to rebuild. The payback loans on that, we didn't finish paying it off until my lifetime.
Okay,
They've always been quite selfish.
Let me pause you there. Let's quickly squeeze in Richard, who's in Edinburgh. Richard, welcome to the show. What do you think? Do you think he's a friend or a foe?
Well, first of all, I think he's a friend. And I completely and utterly disagree with what that last comment was about the Americans helping us out during the First and Second World War.
Okay.
I cannot believe I heard that comment.
Well, no. I think what Christian said, they came in late. They didn't say that they didn't help us, but they came in late. But they did come.
And all the rest of it.
But go ahead, Richard, make your point.
Look, my point is very simple. I think that... if I'm going to be really simple about it, Trump referred to Sleepy Joe, and now he, I think, is Dozy Don. So what am I supposed to say? I don't actually think he's completely understanding what his role should be in order to promote the Western world that we've been enjoying for the last 80 years since the Second World War. And I honestly think that... those last comments were ridiculous.
All right, but I think we clarified those. But Richard, thank you, and thank you for making your point. I mean, what Donald Trump seems to want to do is make all that manufacturing come back to America. But if you're Jaguar Land Rover, are you going to actually... I mean, how long will it take you to start manufacturing cars in America?
It'll take
more than 4 years, by which time Trump is no longer there, by which time you might have to not need them anymore. I
think, Christian, you made a good point in terms of what we have left of that very tenuous link, as far as I'm concerned, with America. In terms of the imports that you were showing us earlier in the figures, we know that America imports 60 billion in regards to UK products. We import, in terms of the US products, about 57 to 58 billion. So we're balanced. Exactly. So it's quite balanced. So in terms of that, we have something. What I don't want to see is see Keir Starmer sell us down the river. We need to look after our farmers. We do need to watch that digital tax.
All right. Thank you for that. Thank you both for that. And thank you for your calls on that as well.